If you have a web application which is already being used by many of your customers, or application which is being used by your test team, and now you want to deploy another version of the same application, or you want to deploy a certain number of bugs to which are being fixed by the development team, you want to publish those defects or a new version to your web application. So how do you mitigate the downtime which is being required to publish that particular changes onto the current running web application? So today in this session, we are going to discuss about the deployment slot and how deployment slots helps us to mitigate the risk or the time for your web application deployment. Hi, my name is Rakesh Suryavanshi, and I'm your host to discuss the topic on the deployment slots. The web application slots basically gives you the ability to deploy your applications onto the different slot in the same web app, so you don't need to create multiple web app resources. So within the same resource, what you can do is you can create different slots. Basically, it will give you another container, or the environment within the same web applications, wherein you can host your application code without affecting the current running production application slot. So they are calling it as a production slot, so don't be confused with when you heard production slot, or when you see the term production slot on your web application, it doesn't mean it is deployed in production, but the main slot or the default slot where the application is getting hosted, they call it as a production slot. And then you can, if obviously, and then you basically you can host multiple slots, or you can create different slots within the same web app, and you can host different version of your web application. And then once you create a slot, you get a different url, and based on the different url, you have the ability to test your application configurations. And then you can make sure once the desired changes are being pushed, or you're happy with the changes, then you can basically swap the slot from the, let's say, staging slot to the production slot or the main slot, along with the configuration if you want to. Obviously all those changes comes through the premium, standard, or the isolated tier of web application or app service. I've logged into my developer portal. Here I have the web application created for this demonstration. The web application is created on the standard plan, and I've deployed the application source code from my Visual Studio for this demonstration. And if I browse the application, it's currently hosted or deployed with the default Visual Studio template of the ASP.NET Core application. Basically, just for the understanding of the difference between the main slot and the staging slot, I've changed the color of the web application just for the demonstration, like color of the background or this label. And if I go back to the to the developer portal, so here in the deployment center or the deployment setting panel, you have the deployment slots option. And by default, when you create the web application or the app service, you get a one slot by default, which is your production slot. So as I mentioned, they call it as a production slot. And here now you can go ahead and create a number of slot depending upon the type of tiers which you have chosen for your web application. So let's say I am calling it as an staging slot for my web application. And as soon as I give the name of my slot, as you can see, the main domain name of my web application is changed from web-app-demo, and it has appended dash staging as well. So let me add the slot. It might take few seconds. The slot is created successfully. So now what I can do is I can go click on the slot hyperlink, and as soon as I click, you can see the exact replica of the web application. Main web application is been created for my slot as well. The only difference is, here you see the slot which is being created with the name of web application, which shows that you are viewing the slot settings for your web application. So here I can go and modify the configuration settings if I want to. For example, uh, in the slot you are using n plus 1 number of settings due to some build updates or any changes on the development, whereas in the main slot you are using n number of settings, something like that. So you can always go ahead and modify the settings here in the slot. And if I go back to the slot again, I can go ahead and check the slot settings here again. So let me go ahead and view browse this particular URL if I'm able to browse it. Yes, I am successfully able to browse it, but the deployment is not been done on this particular slot. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and deploy the application onto this particular slot as well. So as if you watch this carefully, the web application URL in this case is demo web application dash the name of the slot, which is the staging, and then the default namespace. So if I go to the go ahead and deploy the application code onto the slot, that would give you a clear picture. So let me do that. So I'm on my Visual Studio, and here on the web application I'm just changing the background color to orange just to make a difference. Let me deploy the application code this time onto the deployment slots. So I'll quickly go and select the deployment slot. So while deploying the application code from Visual Studio, you have the option to select the web application. Once you select that, you would be able to see the so here in this case you can see the URL, it is pointing to the staging, so it's going to go ahead and deploy the application onto the staging slot. And you can see the staging slot is deployed with the orange color. So if I switch back to the portal again, and if I browse or refresh this, then you can see I have two slots available, which is this one is staging slot with orange color, and there is a main slot which is kind of a production slot, so I don't need to specify any specific URL. So I have a green color and blue color. So here with orange, I'm basically, you can say that I'm deploying any of the bugs or anything like that, and this is my main slot which is in green right now. So this is the way, as you can see, I have just created one web application or the app service here, but within the app service I can have number of different slots, and it's not up to two, but you can create few more if you like to. And then, so as I mentioned, like depending upon the pricing tier you choose, you have the ability to create the different types of slots, or number of slots basically. Now the next thing what you can do with the slots here is you can, as I mentioned, let's say the my web application for the main deployment slot or production slot has got some X number of changes which is being used by some live users or the test members, and now I'm deploying some changes to the staging slot. So I can go ahead and deploy the, I've already deployed basically the changes on the staging slot. So I can, what I can do is I can perform my testing onto the staging environment or staging slot, and once I'm happy with the changes, so what I can do is, without affecting anyone, simply I can go ahead and swap the slot, and this way, within a fraction of couple of seconds, the entire slot or the entire configuration or the deployment will swap from one environment to another environment, one slot to other slot basically. So let me go ahead and swap the slot. as you can see, it says that these are going to be the changes in the source, and these are available in the target. So you would be able to deploying the values from source to target, and you can always go ahead and review the changes if you want to. From the basically it shows the changes in terms of the configuration. So let me go ahead and deploy the changes. So the swapping of the slot is done successfully. Now I can go ahead and refresh the changes. So let me refresh it, and you can see the production which was on the light green, now it is uh, switched to orange if I refresh it, because now we have swapped it. So production becomes orange, and now the staging becomes green. So whatever changes it was there on the staging, it is swap it back to the, you know, from production to staging and staging to production. So this was about these web application slots which you can use for your application deployment configuration, and like pushing the changes forward from one environment to another environment, or basically deploying a release to the existing environment, existing deployed web application environment. I hope this was useful. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up.